Thanks for everybody for being here. I'm very pleased to see this show, recent paintings and works on paper from previous times from Milly. I've spanning, as Carolyn said, 40 years. I've only been following Milly's work for maybe 30 years, so it's nice to see some of the earlier pieces. Um, my job is just to ask you questions, I think. Um, I've done some homework. There was a there, in Milly has been doing extraordinary painting, and and it's been loose and fluid and also structural and grid-like. And I wanted to ask you. There's a quote from 2011. He said, "The grid is a commonplace and omnipresent structure. The intersection of vertical and horizontal represents many things in human history. It's as old as this planet's gravity and our attempts to stand erect on it. Its mystical associations are numerous. Repeated, these directional forces become the web that holds everything together." I, I love that statement. I'm just wondering if that was done you said that in 2011. Do you still see grids that way?
That's prim.
Yeah.
That was the comprehensive. That was the comprehensive view. Yeah. I mean, it's underlying. I don't give it a lot of conscious thought anymore. It's just so embedded in what I do, my way of thinking about painting.
Well, it seems in some ways a picture of the world, and then you play variations on it. But can you talk about the balance of the grid and the gesture and the fluid and the structure?
Mm. Well, actually, it's a way of keeping myself off balance, not balance. Uh, I go from one way of working, one process, they're very different processes, to another deliberately to keep my senses sharp. And I've been doing it for, I guess, about almost 60 years. So it works for me. It also helps if you have ADHD, and it makes it a lot easier to work that way. It's
I like the piece in the show called Conversation. It seems to have that balance. It's got a swatch of painting with loose gesture against a swatch of paint which is gridded, and that's like conversation to yourself with the two modalities of painting.
That work was fun. I mean, those two, the collage is made up of test pieces that were done for paintings. And the paintings that those test pieces were done for were probably years apart, but I pile them up in my studio after I've done a painting. All the test pieces just get piled. And if I can find a way of turning them into something when I'm in the mood to work with them, I do. And that was just absolute good fortune. The conversation between those two test pieces uh, obviously has everything to do with the color that's there and the contrast of the paintings that they actually came from.
You recently did a master's degree, a thesis on the grid in painting. Did that change the way you painted, or is it just was it an opportunity to think more about your own work?
I started working on my master's thesis with the idea of just talking about the grid because I had been doing grid paintings for 20 years by that time. And um, I wanted to better understand why I was where I was in my work. Um, but after several months of working on it, I realized with the help of my supervisor that really it had to be about color and the grid. So that's really what the thesis was about.
Okay. I want to ask you about your titles in this show. Just coming today, I find them quite surprising. You have a series called Landscape, and it's very sort of candid to say this is a reference, or is it did they is the idea inspired by landscape, or is it because they have a horizontal line? Does that make it a landscape for you?
This one's a little bit complicated. The landscape paintings actually follow a painting that was really referring to a vision I had driving in winter past a stand of, actually they were poplars, but for some reason or other, no, they were either poplars or birches, but they were all the same size, and the light and the color just was mesmerizing, but also the verticality and the horizontal were so strong. I did a painting, put it away in my racks, and then years later, I started thinking about landscape again, and really it is the horizontal and the vertical, the trees, the earth, very, very simple. Um, Nothing could be more simple than that.
Well, they're beautiful colors as well. I mean, you've improvised the color and improvised the some of the widths of the bands of the vertical stripes, but so it's like a system to make improvisation on.
They're no longer trees.
No.
No.
And you have another series called Systems. Where does that come from?
These are the systems.
The systems are not quite grids, but they're horizontal, vertical line and overlapping forms sometimes, and they I wouldn't say they are grids, but in the sense they're rectilinear. They're all vertical, horizontal.
Now, the process that I use to do these paintings is really bizarre. They look as if there's a lot of pre-planning, a lot of organization involved, but no more, there's absolutely no more than in the wet-on-wet paintings that I do, where the painting decides where it's going to go, almost from the very first thing that I do on the canvas. And instead of doing sketches, either with paint or any other material, I take color swatches and play with them, rearrange them, make connections, look at differences in size and scale and the kinds of relationships. And then I say, okay, I've got something that I can see this as a painting. But no sooner do I get started on it, and it gets shifted around. The color is not exactly the same as the color swatch. The dimensions of my canvas change everything, and then the painting has to grow a bit at a time, in a different way than the wet-on-wet paintings, a much slower process, much more calculated process. The wet-and-wet paintings have to be done all at once because I'm working with acrylic paint and it dries. Hour and a half is about tops for working wet and wet. And then, of course, you can go back into a painting after that. But it's always a lot more difficult to go back into a wet and wet painting after it's got a dry surface on it.
But sometimes you, like the wet on wet here is overlaid then with the careful rectangles. That's another process.
Yeah, this particular painting went through a lot of difficulties over a period of a couple of months. And finally, when I had the ground, what I thought was as perfect as I couldn't see another thing to do, I realized that it needed more. It needed a real punch. I'm kind of hoping that I get to work with this kind of an idea again, but I can't force it. It just has to come at the right time, whenever that might be. Yeah, it really needed the contrast of elements that are on top.
So I have to say my favorite paintings of your current work are the wet on wet, the large one in the front, From the Dark, and the remarkable series of Life Itself, which are all loose. They're on squares, which makes them somewhat rigid, but they're loosely painted. And I wanted to ask you about the title, Life Itself.
It took a long time to get to the title. I did those paintings. They were very easy to do. They just flowed. And that was a couple of years ago. The dates there on the work. I did the paintings, hung them up in my studio, enjoyed looking at them, thought about what they were about, and it took me. I thought, okay, they're about movement. They're about speed, a certain amount of speed. They're about flow. And I had all these thoughts, but it still didn't occur to me a title until it was probably more than a year later. This is very unusual for me. Usually the work and the title sort of grow together in some ways. This time, the work was no problems with the work. It was just, what am I going to call these things? And so the title, Life Itself, it just appeared, and I thought that's exactly what it is. It's that sort of all those beautiful colors that are just flowing. They're disappearing like a river. They're coming and going like a river. And a totally bizarre thing is I'm reading Anne Patchett's Run, a book written about 20 years ago, and I'm about halfway through it. Last night, I came across this bit where there's a retired priest who is in a home for retired priests, and he's contemplating his own family situation and his relationship with the church and his relationship with God. And he's sort of in a daze, having trouble waking up, and he finally realizes that he's had his faith tested so many times, and he's felt somewhat uncomfortable about telling people about the afterlife and assuring them that there is an afterlife for them. And finally, he realizes that God is in every breath you take, because he's having heart problems and breathing is really difficult. Every breath that you take is God. And God is in life itself.
Great.
And that just, I couldn't believe it.
The paintings are Life Itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So the title of the paintings came first, and then I read this and I think, my God, is that the connection that those paintings make? I can make up all kinds of stories now.
But that's beautiful. That's beautiful. We could talk for a couple more hours. I would love to. I would love to, but no, we're not allowed to.
Yeah.
So thank you, Milly.
My pleasure.
Thank you
Thank you,
both
Dan.
very, very much.